Curtis on his time, breaking down the stories every view will unwind. From left to right, we'll see the light. It's balance, we're chasing, no fighters fight. Curtis still beats, talking it straight. Let's hear both sides, let's communicate. Politics and reason, let's find the truth. Curtis still beats here to bridge it for you. Debates, insights, it's all on the screen. Curtis still be keeping it keen. Hit subscribe, stay a while, let's dive in deep with Curtis. So be the combos you need. The combos you need. Insights, it's on the screen. Curtis, I'll be keeping it keen. Hit subscribe, stay a while, let's dive in deep with Curtis. I'll be the convo's unique. Curtis, I'll be talking it straight. Let's hear both sides, let's communicate. Politics and reason, let's find the truth. Curtis, I'll be here to bridge it for you. Debates, insights, it's all on the screen. Curtis, I'll be keeping it keen. Hit subscribe, stay a while, let's dive in deep with Curtis. So be the combos you need. The combos you need. The combos you need.
Yes, thank you very much. It is I, your tired midnight blogger, what blogs in this case at 2:13 p.m. I know most of you are probably still hungover from watching Gutfield too late last night, but anyhow, today we're going to continue to talk about Article 3 of the Constitution. Even though it's the simplest one, it's one that has had to be done in 2 episodes. Oh well. Let's start with the housekeeping stuff. You know, please like, share, subscribe. Think about becoming a member if you have the funds and feel the desire to do so. Maybe gift out a membership. On that note, I keep forgetting that I can do that myself. So I'm going to send out 5 gifted memberships right now. All right. And let's say hello to everybody in the chat. Gorilla's Random Thoughts, Kapla! May you bring glory to your streams. Which one is up to you? And you get it. It's a peeing joke. Welcome, Gorillas. Random Thoughts. Let's see if I'm smart enough to do this. Yes. Gorilla's Random Thoughts. And welcome, Resolute Germ. Hope you are having a wonderful day. And the crowd goes wild over Gorillas and Resolute Germ. Hail to you, Jeff B. Listen to the crowd go wild for the people of the stream. And Kevin Theme Park Adventures. Welcome. Oh, wrong one. I guess it really doesn't matter. Any noise will do, right? And yes, thank you very much, Gorillas. I think I have one of the better intros for being a bottom tier monetized channel. I think I have one of the better songs in the internet. Yours are a little bit better, but then you put thought into yours, whereas I just took mine from you. So there it is. And I think Culture Casino's got some amazing songs as well. Let's see here. And Real Weight Nation Gaming Clips. Howdy, howdy. I will see you after work tomorrow. We shall continue with Gravity Falls. So there we are. Now, who are the 5 lucky people, or perhaps not so lucky as things may be? Resolute Germ received a gift membership from this dummy named Curtis Selby who owes me money. Jeff D received a gift membership. DJ Ronnie G, the Phantom Boomer, and LPG hashtag Free the Net. Some very deserving and supportive people. Thank God. I need to actually do something to make it worth their time. 2 more things and then I'll dive into the topic. First of all, I have a goal. Any super chat of any size. And I will be reading Marbury versus Madison. Oh, there it goes! We've already accomplished the goal. Huzzah! Resolute Germ. You're very welcome for the membership. God bless you, sir. And because of your generosity, yours truly will be reading Marbury versus Madison in a pirate voice. Unless you would prefer a different voice, let me know. You're the one that contributed. But at the very least, I will default to a pirate voice. Gorilla's Random Thoughts would make the joke about the legs, but ScrewTube always censors me. You know what the joke is. I'm having a senior moment. I really don't. Something about legs. I don't know. I'll probably think of it at 3 in the morning. And one last thing, maybe 2 more things. Do the lower courts assume too much power? Is the poll so far? 8 votes, 100%. Everybody here thinks that the lower courts assume too much power. The other options are no. I like turtles. And because there was a person last show that assume that they just know what I'm thinking, I put a thing in for them. So if you come back, just click on I already know what this channel is, so you can at least say that you had a voice. And partly because I'm money hungry, but also because I just like having a goal. I'm going to make a goal of 5 super chats of any color. And, I don't know. What would you guys like? We'll, let's see, we're doing Dark Shadows tonight. I have no idea what you guys would even actually like. I'll do a karaoke tonight. At, I'm going to say midnight Central. And if there's enough interest, I may even share links so that you poor guys can come in and sing with me. Demonetized stream, but that's okay. Alrighty. Back to the legs. Back to the legs. I don't know. Yes, I am going to be looking as soon as I'm done with the show, and I will get, if you'd like, some episodes picked. So worry not. PvP, and by the way, welcome. And since everyone else got applause, so should you. Huzzah! PvP. Yes, I will pick episodes after this show. Yeah, and we have Sci-Fi Sit-Down. A lot of wonderful creators in this wonderful community. Welcome. All right, let's stop the music. We shall stop the music, maybe. There we go. And we will dive into the topic, which is the rest of my discussion of Article 3 of the Constitution. Now, we've already talked about how Article 3 establishes the judiciary, and it was a very short article. And yet, there's a lot there for such a short article because the founding fathers assumed it would be the weakest of the branches. They almost honestly didn't put it in there. Uh, but at least that was my understanding, is that some of them didn't even think that it was necessary to make that third branch, but enough of them did. The majority of them did. So in it went. They didn't define it very much because I think they rather felt that it was self-explanatory. All the courts in the land will be superseded by a Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court will have some minimalistic powers in an effort to keep the checks and balances going. But it became more powerful as time went by. And that's one of the things we're going to talk about. And I will later, thanks to the generosity. Let me make sure I get the person right here. I'm just tired enough to be a little stupid. Because of the generosity of Resolute Germ, I will be reading Marbury versus Madison in a pirate voice. Da, 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 da. But let's start talking about some of the issues that Article 3 raises for us. I'm going to cite two sources: the Heritage Foundation, so you've got something that's right of center, and the ACLU, which I would say is very far left of center, but I think that the leftists in my life would say that ACLU is maybe just slightly left of center. So we have someone who's slightly right and somebody who's slightly left, unless you're on one of the sides, in which case one side is totally right and the other one is totally balderdash. Resolute Germ, it's all self-explanatory until you get a wee tall did population. You are correct. In fact, I think you deserve some applause. I'm just playing because I finally discovered this the other day, and I was like, why have I not been using those? PvP says 2 judges in Nova Scotia have banned court workers from wearing poppies in their courtroom. Well, I don't know what to say to that. Resolute German. Good one. Slightly left of Mao, maybe. Well, because I have my bias, I'm going to start with the Heritage Foundation. So any of my leftist friends who are listening are probably tuning out as we speak, because let's face it, none of us really wants our worldview challenged. We just want to believe what we want to believe. And that's true, honestly, of both sides, myself often included, all too often. So, Heritage Foundation, Judicial Power, Article 3, Section 2, Clause 1. Somebody messaged me. What did they message me about? Oh, I see. They banned poppies in Canada. Interesting. All righty. Jeff B, that's sad. PvP, World War I. Oh, that's why? Holy crap. And I should have thought of it. It should have just popped right into my mind, but the chronic fatigue is real. PvP, that's disgusting. I'm so sorry. That's disgusting. The judicial power shall extend to all cases in law and equity arising under this Constitution and the laws of the United States. This article and section delineates the scope of the federal judicial power by listing 9 kinds of cases and controversies to which the judicial power of the United States may extend. By far the most important is the category encompassing, quote, all cases in law and equity arising under this Constitution, the laws of the United States, and treaties made or which shall be made under their authority. I used to study the martial arts, and my sensei was a very remarkable person, but sadly also ended up going crazy. That's a discussion for another day. But the reason I bring him up is every now and then he would throw out some very incredible nuggets of wisdom. Whether he was crazy or not, he did have a wealth of knowledge. And one of the things he pointed out that I've never been taught or shared with anywhere else, but I believe it is true: treaties supersede. Let me repeat that: treaties supersede the Constitution. Now, this may or may not be the way lawyers put it, but the truth of it is, a war, often a treaty is made at the point of a gun. So if we've lost a war, say, then basically the Constitution is no longer worth much of anything. It's that treaty. And unfortunately, we've won most of our wars, or at least we haven't lost any that meant the end of the Constitution. But we have entered into some very unfortunate agreements where various powers and peoples have tried to use treaty authority to supersede the Constitution. The pandemic was one case of this. I don't often talk about it because YouTube doesn't like me talking about it, so I will move on to the case at hand. Anyway, these cases that arise under the Constitution, the laws of the states, the treaties, and under their authority. This is often referred to as the federal question jurisdiction, and although this is something of a misnomer, it is a convenient label. From the beginning, the framers intended the scope of the jurisdiction to be broad. The federal question jurisdiction made its first appearance in the Constitutional Convention in the Virginia Plan, which would have authorized federal courts to hear questions which may involve the national peace and harmony. By the time the Committee of Detail began its work, the convention had added to this language a grant of jurisdiction over cases arising under the laws passed by the general legislature. When the Committee of Detail reported to the convention, the reference to national peace and harmony had disappeared, but the arising under language remained. There was little discussion of this provision at the convention. In the course of a single day, the convention made three important changes. It replaced the reference to laws passed by the legislature with laws of the United States. And on separate motions, it extended the judicial power first to cases arising under the Constitution and then to cases arising under treaties, in addition to the cases arising under federal laws. I have often wondered why the Supreme Court rarely has anything to say about treaties, or have I just missed those cases? I'm not a lawyer after all, so. I'm not a lawyer, but I play one on TV. When the Committee of Style reported to the convention in September, the provision read substantially as it does today. The federal judicial power extends, quote, to all cases, both in law and equity, arising under this Constitution, the laws of the United States, treaties made, which shall be made under their authority. I wonder how many times we can put that in this article. All right. In fact, the chat is smoking. Here we go. PvP sharing the video about the courts disgustingly taking out the poppies in their courtrooms. And who wants to bet they don't? Those judges are never removed. Sci-Fi Sit There and Curtis Selby is sad how common sense has gone out the window in the political and economic discussions. It's very rare. Indeed true. And thank you for sharing the video, PvP. At Jeff B agreed, it's not just the honor to honor World War I vets, but all the vets that died in that horrible war. It's very disgusting. Resolute Germ, that is objectively untrue. What did I say? Did I say something? My apologies if I did. Yeah, just let me know if I said something or somebody else said something that's objectively untrue. And I will be happy to eat my words, whatever they were that were wrong. Just let me know. Woke judges are becoming a problem. That's been the case in the United States for 50 years or more. Sci-Fi Sit Down. The Constitution and Declaration of Independence are important to our rights. However, if people aren't willing to fight and defend them, they are just pieces of paper. Correct. Absolutely correct. All right. So, where am I at? The potential breadth of this language prompted criticism by opponents of the proposed Constitution during the debates over ratification in the key states of Virginia. George Mason, for example, could find no limitation whatsoever, quote, no limitation whatsoever, with respect to the nature or jurisdiction of the federal courts. James Madison, a supporter of ratification, did not dispute this assertion. Rather, he asserted that the judicial power of the national government should correspond with the legislative. When does a case arise under federal law so that it falls within the judicial power of the United States? The authoritative answer to this question is found largely in two decisions by Chief Justice John Marshall in the early years of the Republic. Oh, Jeff B., God bless you. $5 super chat. Not an advocate for karaoke unless the song is The Sound of Silence. Well, just let me know if we get 5 super chats. Whoever donates, just let me know what you would like as a reward, and I will be happy to provide it if it is in my ability so to do. The better known of the two decisions is Osborne versus Bank of the United States, 1824. One thing I like about the Heritage Foundation, maybe I'm wrong to like them, but the fact that a court case is over 200 years old does not, in their minds, invalidate it. And I've never had anyone explain to me why something is invalidated just because it is old. Just saying. Marshall's delineation of the constitutional scope of the jurisdictional grant proceeds in two steps. First, he declares that a question is federal if the title or right set up by the party may be defeated by one construction of the Constitution or law of the United States and sustained by the opposite construction, provided the facts necessary to support the action be made out. In other words, a federal question is a question whose answer depends in some way on federal law. Marshall then says that a case arises under the Constitution or laws of the United States if a federal question forms an ingredient of the original cause. That is, it's an element of the plaintiff's claim. The breadth of this definition is made clear by a companion case in which the court upheld federal jurisdiction over a lawsuit, not a business suit, by the Bank of the United States to recover on negotiable notes issued by a state bank. Bank of the United States versus Planters Bank of Georgia, 1824. This is just a subtle side note. I know this is controversial, but I would rather have a Bank of the United States as a Fed. I don't know that I even like the Bank of the United States as an idea, but I would prefer that to the Fed. And that's all I'm going to say about that. The liability of the defendant state bank would appear to have depended solely on state law. How then could Marshall have concluded that a federal question formed an element of the original cause? Marshall's answer is that there are some federal questions, for example, the federal bank's capacity to sue, that necessarily exist in every case brought by the bank, even though the particular proposition is not questioned. Osborne thus establishes that so long as a proposition of federal law is a logical antecedent of the plaintiff's claim, it is sufficient as a constitutional matter to support federal judicial power over the case. So if state law is all that is involved, the Supreme Court should stay out of it, if I'm understanding that correctly. If, however, federal law is involved, then absolutely the Supreme Court can step in if it sees the desire to do so. Resolute germ, a treaty cannot in any circumstances supersede the Constitution. What is your source on that? Let me see. I actually prefer that thinking. I would rather it was the truth, but I would like to know what the source is for that. A treaty cannot supersede the Constitution. Let me see what I get. Effects of treaties. And I probably shouldn't let myself get sidetracked, but I'm the dumb person that brought it up. So let's do some digging and see who's right. It may be him, it may be me, and it may not even matter. But let's look it up. Saying my internet will work long enough to do so. Okay, Article 2, Section 2, Clause 2 from Constitution Annotated. He shall have the power by and with advice and consent of the Senate to make treaties, provided 2/3 of the senators present concur. He shall nominate and by and with the advice and consent of the Senate shall appoint ambassadors, etc., etc., etc. While treaties may preempt contradictory state law and supplant earlier in-time federal legislation, the treaty power is not so broad as to override the Constitution. The Supreme Court stated in dicta in several cases treaties may not alter the Constitution or authorize acts that the Constitution expressly prohibits. Although the court has never invalidated a treaty itself on constitutional grounds, it is held that courts may not give treaties domestic effect in a way that interferes with individual rights guaranteed in the Constitution. In Boos versus Berry, the Supreme Court held that a treaty-based obligation to protect foreign embassies did not authorize Congress to enact legislation that infringed on individuals' First Amendment right to freedom of speech. Interesting. Similarly, in Reed versus Covert, a plurality of the court determined that the United States could not rely on international agreements as authority to conduct criminal proceedings that did not comply with the grand jury and jury trial guarantees in the Fifth and Sixth Amendments. I would suggest that this might need to be the grounds for suits appertaining to COVID, because a lot of the things that were done under COVID were done on the authority of treaties with the UN and in regard to treaties we had made appertaining to the World Health Organization. I'm just putting that out there. The Supreme Court has since cited the Reed plurality opinion and described its conclusions related to the constitutional constraints on the treaty power as well established. So that would make Resolute Germ right and me and my sensei wrong. However, I want to add a caveat because I am, after all, human and we just keep things go. If we had lost World War II, I don't think the Constitution really would have much mattered at that point. I think whatever treaty we made with Germany would have ended up superseding. Whether it should have or not wouldn't be the case. It would be a matter of basically lots of blood. So it's a little bit of a caveat, and maybe I'm not being fair. I'm going to cede you the point, Resolute Germ, at least as far as law and constitutionality go. As far as practicality go, uh, let's just hope we don't ever lose a war and don't have to put that to the test. But I'm actually glad that you made me, or didn't really make me, but caused me to look this up. I think I learned a lot there. PvP, I'd join a karaoke stream if it wasn't too late. My apartment neighbors might not appreciate my vocal skills. And Lizzie Armstrong is here. Howdy, howdy. Resolute Germ, the Fed operates as the Bank of the United States. There's no functional difference. My only caveat to that is, if I remember right, and maybe I'm wrong, let me know. You may know better in this case too. I think the president appointed the head of that bank, and I get the impression that the Fed pretty much thinks that they're totally independent of the president. And resolute germ is always right. Oh, very well, very well. Love you, brother. Love you, brother. Whether you prove me right or wrong, if that matters slightly less anyway. I mean, facts matter. I like Ben Shapiro says facts don't care about our feelings, but at the same time, your feelings matter to me more than being right all the time anyway. All right, so back to judicial power. I'm going to skip down a bit. Capacious though they are, neither the I maybe skipped down too far. So anyway, 3 years before Osborne and Cohen's versus Virginia, the court considered a challenge to its own authority to exercise appellate jurisdiction over a case originating in state court. The defendants convicted of a crime under state law invoked what we would call today a defense of preemption. They claimed the protection of an act of Congress. They also asserted that the Supreme Court could consider their appeal because it was a case arising under federal law. Gotcha. And I'm looking at what William is sending me there. The breadth of this decision is made clear by a companion case in which the court upheld federal jurisdiction over a suit by the Bank of the United States. I already read that. All right, so in Cohen's versus Virginia, they asserted the Supreme Court could consider their appeal arose under federal law. The state of Virginia disagreed, taking the position that a case could arise under the federal constitution or federal law only if the constitution or law was the basis for the claim of the party who had initiated the lawsuit. The state's interpretation is a plausible reading of the language of Article 3. The Supreme Court rejected it as too narrow. The court said that cases are defined by the rights of both parties, and a case may truly be said to arise under the Constitution or the law of the United States, whenever its correct decision depends on the construction of either. The Cohen's definition thus supports the Supreme Court's jurisdiction to hear appeals from state courts when those courts have decided federal questions. Capacious though they are, neither the Osborne definition nor the one in Cohen's would necessarily cover all the cases in which Congress has authorized the removal of actions from state to federal court. But in a series of 19th century decisions, the court made plain that Article 3 authorizes removal of any case in which a defense under federal law has been invoked, even though the federal issue may prove not to be dispositive. The leading case is Tennessee versus Davis, 1880. James Davis was a federal revenue officer whose duties included seizing illicit distilleries. In the course of one such effort, he was assaulted and fired upon by a number of armed men. He fired back, killing one of the men, and was prosecuted in state court for murder. Davis removed the case to federal court under an act of Congress that allowed removal of any suit brought against a federal revenue officer on account of any act done under color of any revenue law. The state challenged the constitutionality of the removal statute, but the Supreme Court held that the statute was valid. The court relied heavily on Marshall's opinion in Cohen's. It emphasized that in order to preserve the supremacy of federal judicial power, it is essential that the national government be able to take control whenever and wherever a case arises under the constitutional laws or treaties of the United States, whether it be civil or criminal in any stage of its progress. All right. The Supreme Court's decisions have thus established that Congress can authorize federal courts to hear cases in which a federal question is 1, a logical antecedent of the plaintiff's claim, whether or not contested, or 2, the basis of a defense actually raised, even though it may not be dispositive, or 3, the basis of the decision actually made, typically by a state court. The area of uncertainty involves Congress's power to authorize jurisdiction over cases in which a federal question is an element neither of the original cause nor the defense, but in which a litigant is a member of a class that Congress seeks to protect. In other words, federal employees sued in state court. Or the area is one in which Congress has taken an interest under an Article 1 grant of power. In other words, consumer protection or nuclear accidents. Until recently, the Supreme Court case law cast little doubt on the breadth of Congress's authority to vest federal question jurisdiction in federal courts. However, the decision in Mesa versus California in 1989, I'm going to party like it's 1989, makes clear that the power is not unlimited. In Mesa, the court construed the statute that allows removal to federal court of suits brought against federal officers for acts done under color of their federal office, a modern day version of the statute involved in Tennessee versus Davis. The court held that the statute allows removal only if the officer alleges a federal defense to the state law claim. The court explained that if the statute were construed to grant federal jurisdiction simply because a federal officer is a defendant, it would unnecessarily present grave constitutional problems. Which makes sense to me. It kind of sounds like I'm a federal officer, I can do whatever the hell I want, and at least the states can do nothing about it. I would hope that that's not the case. The opinion thus implies that to support arising under jurisdiction, a federal question must be present somewhere in the case. However, the court did not rule out the possibility that under some circumstances, Congress might be able to vest arising under jurisdiction to protect federal interests even in the absence of a federal question. And we wonder how the states' rights have gone so far away. It's important to emphasize that the broad construction of the arising under language of Article 3 has no bearing on the scope of the statutory grant of federal question jurisdiction, even though the statute uses language identical to that of the Constitution. The court has read the statutory jurisdiction not to extend as far as it could under the Constitution. Full discussion is beyond the scope of this essay and this blog, for that matter. It is sufficient to note that neither a federal defense, as in Cohen's, nor a logical antecedent provides a basis for district court jurisdiction under some law that he gives here. Rather, the federal question must be, at a minimum, a necessary element of a well-pleaded complaint, the plaintiff's claim for relief. Finally, it should be made clear the federal jurisdiction extends to cases, not issues. When a federal court has jurisdiction over a case that arises under federal law, the jurisdiction extends to the whole case, and the court will often have power to consider other issues in the case, whether state or federal. The court defined the boundaries of the constitutional case in United Mine Workers versus Gibbs, 1966. Under Gibbs, if a federal court has jurisdiction over a case based on the plaintiff's federal claims, it can also hear non-federal claims, as long as the federal and non-federal claims derive from a common nucleus of operative fact and are sufficiently related to the plaintiff, would ordinarily be expected to try them all in one judicial proceeding. Congress codified the substance of the Gibbs decision in 1990 when it recognized supplemental jurisdiction in Section 1367 of the Judicial Code. Yay. Until 2011, the removal chapter of the Judicial Code included a provision, Section 1441C, that appeared to go beyond the limits of judicial power as defined in Gibbs. Congress cured this infirmity in the Federal Court's Jurisdiction and Venue Clarification Act of 2011, when it rewrote Section 1441C to require the district court upon removal to sever and remand all claims not within its jurisdiction. So now we know everything, right? Wrong. All right, let's see what we've got here. Everybody saying hello. Lizzie Armstrong, 6:41 a.m. Bit slow this morning. Stayed up chatting in cyber time. Right on. Gorilla's Random Thoughts. Just had the most disgusting soda. Review uploading now. Nice. feel free to share that in the chat. I'll be happy to watch that when I'm done here. Reviewing Pepsi. Are you Gorilla? Jeff B. What brand Gorilla? I'm drinking a squirt soda, which most wouldn't like. It's based upon grapefruit. I am reading Pure Panhandle, Oklahoma Panhandle water right now. So there we have it. Now, probably a lot of that was about as clear to you as mud, because it's about as clear as mud to me. Where I'm going with all this is there are guidelines. We think of them more as guidelines than rules for when courts are supposed to be able to apply their power. And I don't know if any of the rest of you caught this, but a court a court doesn't work the way we think it does, or at least it's not supposed to. A judge can't just sit down and write that whoever the hell he doesn't like has to do this or has to do that, or Trump has to pay SNAP, or Trump can't pay SNAP, or whatever. There has to be a case brought. There's some exceptions like warrants for arrest and things of that nature. And I do believe that even though I am disgusted by the judges banning poppies, they do have that right within their courtroom. They're basically, the courtroom is their kingdom, as long as they, aren't impeached. And I think that should happen a lot more often. I'm with Culture Casino on this one. A lot of these federal judges need to be losing their jobs. And I don't clearly understand why more of them are not. But at least, and granted, this is all a bunch of conservative stuff, because the good and the bad thing about conservatism is we actually believe in following the rules and following the laws. We don't believe in rioting to get our way. We don't believe in violence to get our way. We believe in going to the law books, going to the Constitution, whatever, and we're going to do things the way it tells us to, and we'll work out a solution together, but we'll work it out. We are a nation of laws, not men. In spite of what some of us think, it's not just arbitrary, people can decide whatever they want. There are rules. And if we quit following them, we quit being a society. We quit being a civilization. We become a mob. And ugly, bad things happen. So, now, showing you the conservative side of what the court should be, I'll now show you the liberal side, or a liberal side. Gorillas, it's Olipop Banana Cream Soda. That sounds like it should be good, but I'm guessing not. Ooh, PvP, is this the poem I think it is? Let me see. I have been a bad person, because every year, yep, dad nabbit, and I in my self-interest, I allowed the year to pass by and did not read in Flanders Fields. I will read that before this stream is over. I am so sorry that I let the 7th pass without any gesture. My lame excuse is that I worked, but I still should have taken a few minutes at least. Jeff B. Artificial banana is pretty gross even for a gorilla. PvP, these judges are clueless beyond belief, total ignorance of history and the woke way. Yeah, Gorillas sent me Tom McDonald's, is that his name? One of his latest songs. I definitely recommend it. I'm kind of done trying to be centrist, but having said that, I also don't want to be completely unfair. and I don't want the other side to have zero voice. So let's take a look at what the ACLU says about Article 3. I'm not going to reread Article 3, Section 1 and 2, although they're interesting enough, and they're basically the sum of what we're discussing and where all this discussion comes from. Well, hell's bells. They don't have nothing. I thought they would have some commentary, but evidently they don't. They just have the actual Article 3. Well, good on you, ACLU. Related issues, national security. Fight against unjust national security practices and policies. Your donation. I mean, I'm not donating shit to you guys. Sorry. So evidently the left has nothing to say except read Article 3, which is, that's cool. That's fine. I would have thought they would have had something. This just shows to go you what happens when you don't read an article before your show. Yep, they've got nothing to say. It's just, this is what it says. I'm going to let that silence just speak for itself. I'm not going to read anything into it. You guys tell me what you think. They've got nothing to say about it. Is that good? Is that bad? Is that profound, or is that stupid? It's like some Steven Seagal movies. Sometimes I can't tell if what I'm looking at is awesome or stupid. I will let you guys be the judge. PvP has left a Wikipedia. John McCrae. Good. Resolution, I'm done being fair to the other side. They get no say. I really don't blame you. I really don't. After Charlie Kirk, you got to believe me. It's hard for me to even give them a shot. Oh, I didn't even mean that as a pun. I realized even as I was saying it, that's a Freudian slip. I'm so sorry. And he did, yeah. He died in the war. I think now, since the ACLU has nothing to say about the article and is just going to let it stand as it is, and again, that may be awesome. That may be stupid. Since they have nothing to say, I'm going to read in Flanders Fields because that's the way I roll. I can't believe I didn't read it this year. God, I'm slipping bad, brothers. I'm slipping bad. All right, and does Wikipedia have? Yes, they do. Yes, they do. Here we go. This is in Flanders Fields. I know it's not really the Constitution, but basically, here's the point of this. The main reason Resolute Germ is right is because we won the damn war. We can debate, and I can be wrong, and he can be right because we won that war. If we'd lost that war, I wonder. I really do wonder. Since I saved so much time by the liberals having nothing to say about Article 3 of the Constitution, I'm going to read to you about John McCrae and read his poem, and then we'll move on to Marbury versus Madison. In Flanders Fields is a war poem in the form of a rondeau. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. It's been a minute since I took my history class or my literature classes. Written during the First World War by Canadian physician Lieutenant Colonel John McCrae. He was inspired to write it on May 3, 1950, after presiding over the funeral of friend and fellow soldier Lieutenant Alexis Helmer, who died in the Second Battle of Ypres. According to legend, fellow soldiers retrieved the poem after McCrae, initially dissatisfied with his work, discarded it. In Flanders Fields was first published on December 8 of that year in the London magazine Punch. Flanders Fields is a common English name of the World War I battlefields in Belgium and France. He was a poet and a physician from Guelph, Ontario. He developed an interest in poetry at a young age, wrote it throughout his life. His earliest works were published in the mid-1890s in Canadian magazines and newspapers. He enrolled at the age of 41 with the Canadian Expeditionary Force following the outbreak of the First World War. He had the option of joining the medical corps because of his training and age, but he volunteered instead to join a fighting unit as a gunner and medical officer. It's his second tour of duty in the Canadian military. He had previously fought with a volunteer force in the Second Boer War. I'm trying very hard not to get off track here. I still remember what was sung in South America or South Africa recently about what we should do to the Boers. I'm still not happy about that song. He considered himself a soldier first. His father was a military leader in Guelph and McRae, grew up believing in the duty of fighting for his country and empire. He fought in the Second Battle of Ypres in the Flanders region of Belgium. The German army launched one of the first chemical attacks in the history of war. They attacked French positions north of the Canadians with chlorine gas on April 22 of 1915. They were unable to break through the Canadian lines. So anyone that says that Canadians are pansies, just remember they held the frickin' line in the very first chemical attack in the history of war. The Canadian line held for over 2 weeks. In a letter written to his mother, McRae described the battle as a nightmare. For 17 days and 17 nights, none of us have had our clothes off, nor our boots even, except occasionally. And all that time when I was awake, gunfire and rifle fire never ceased for 60 seconds straight. Behind it all was the constant background of the sights of the dead, the wounded, the maimed, and a terrible anxiety lest the line should give way. All right, here is the poem itself. In Flanders fields, the poppies blow between the crosses, row on row, that mark our place, and in the sky the larks, still bravely singing, fly scarce heard amid the guns below. We are the dead. Short days ago we lived, felt dawn, saw sunset glow, loved, and were loved. And now we lie in Flanders fields. Take up our quarrel with the foe. To you, from failing hands, we throw the torch. Be yours to hold it high. If ye break faith with us who die, we shall not sleep, though poppies grow in Flanders fields. There it is. And yeah, with Charlie Kirk's passing, I think that takes on some meaning. November 11th is Remembrance Day, and this is the first time I've let the day pass without thinking about it. And I don't even know how many years. I just went to work like a big dumb dope. Do my job. Do the job. And did not even pass a thought for it. I hate that. I'm so sorry. PvP, that's what makes me so angry. Those judges are disrespectful of the men that died for their freedom of speech. Agreed. Resolute Germ, if we lost the war, the country is overgrown and the Constitution is invalid. Yeah, that's the sad practicality, or whatever you want to call it, the sad reality of losing the war. That's why we've got to keep America strong, or we will lose everything. Lose the Armstrong. We do in Flanders Fields at the relevant memorials for service here in Australia. And I'm glad to know that. Overthrown damn autocorrect. Gorilla's random thoughts. But still, I'm not saying that you are wrong. Constitutionally, legally, you are totally right in what you said. But as we're both acknowledging, that all relies on our soldiers, our military, basically us being able to conserve our borders, conserve our countries. Gorilla's random thoughts. My favorite war story was when the Canadians threw canned food into German trenches. A resolute German past glory does not excuse modern weaknesses. Ooh, ouch! This is resolute Germ's words. PvP, don't be mad at me. Canada is militarily worthless. PvP, Germ, why can't you not miss a chance to crap on my country? I'm aware the military is weak now. It's because the liberals gutted it. Gorilla's random thoughts. If anyone invades the U.S., who will turn the Geneva suggestions into a to-do list, the Appalachian men, the Alabama rednecks, Mississippi squirrel hunters, Florida men, the Texas Armada. Don't forget a few rednecks in Oklahoma might. I've recently measured a lot of houses that have a gun at every single door. So yeah, I kind of pity the fool that goes into Oklahoma with less than 1 million people. I don't think many of them will come out. They may take us, but I don't think many of them will come back out alive. PvP, we lost 51 soldiers in Afghanistan. Yeah. Gorilla's random thoughts. Look up that story. It got its own section in the Geneva suggestions. Yeah, no, PvP. You guys had a great military, even as late as the '80s, maybe even a little later than that. But Trudeau has really done a number on your country, and I'm not saying that to rub it in. I'm very sad about it. I want to see Canada great again, as well as America and Britain and Ireland and France and Mexico and hell. I mean, anyone who wishes us well, I want them all great again. And those who wish us ill, well, yeah, come get some. Gorillas, yeah, but one would turn the Geneva suggestions into a to-do list. Yeah, well, I mean that's kind of the way guerrilla warfare goes, and that's on both sides. Let's just face it. So, I know that I probably did a terrible job with the liberal side of the argument. I'm going to look for one more thing. Liberals on the third article of the Constitution. Let's see if there's anything that's actually worth our time. Yeah, I already know that. I know that. I know that. Simple Constitution. I don't know that I'm going to come across anything that's worth my time. I'm using Google, and Google is giving me squat. I'm surprised at that. Google is usually the mouthpiece of the libs. Democrats. Let's see. The Hill, Article 3. Nope. Nope, that's a right. What the hell? A right-wing article on page 1 of Google? Something's wrong. Something's very, very wrong. What could it be? Wait, hold on. Hold on. I'm going to check some things here. Oh, gravity's still working. The pen fell from my hand. Let me test the water in the bottle. Yeah, water is still wet. Something is fundamentally wrong with the universe. I'm seeing reasonable and right-wingish type of articles on page 1 of a Google search. My friends, I have to share this because otherwise you will think I've finally gone insane. I'm kind of wondering if I haven't. Please let me know. Okay, so we got the Hill here saying that Trump's fantasy of the third term is an unconstitutional nightmare, blah, blah, blah. I mean, I'm not, the Hill isn't as liberal as most, but, whatever. See, CNN, Johnson says he's spoken with Trump, more, a bunch of liberal crap here, but this has nothing to do with Article 3, really. And then we go into just scholarly stuff like I've already read, Britannica.com, constitutioncenter.org, law.cornell.edu. The Senate.gov, and then like Massachusetts Democrats want to stop potential for a constitutional convention. There's almost nothing liberal here at all. I mean, there is, but it has nothing to do with the actual, which is Google's, normal state of things. We're not concerned about Article 3 of the Constitution. We're concerned with making sure Trump looks bad. So that part is what makes me think I'm sane. But like, here, sadly, the left in America do not believe that it is the Article 3's third's duty and responsibility of the courts to interpret the law. They feel that courts should make law. That is a frickin' conservative statement. And this is page 1. I didn't have to dig to page 8. Wow. Wow. Mark the day on the calendars, guys. Maybe some conservative snuck his way into Google. I'm not going to read the Boston Globe for $1. Screw that. But anyway, the only thing I can really find for the Dems is Trump is bad, Trump is bad, Trump is bad. That's their response to Article 3, and evidently Massachusetts Democrats want to stop the potential for a constitutional convention, which is fine, but it's not what I was trying to look up. So thank you, Google. You reestablished my belief in my sanity and your incompetence. Jeff B. Wolverines. Yes. PvP Carney sent $2 billion to prop up Ukraine military. Why didn't that money go to our military? Or hell, even half of it. Gorilla's random thoughts. So Jeff B, the Colorado boys, you say? Yep. PvP Carney wants Canada weak. It's his globalist agenda. I would concur. And hello, Booty Duty Nick. He is laughing and saying that something is wrong. Well, you are welcome here if you are even a moderately reasonable person, at whatever side of the aisle you may be on. So, welcome, welcome. Resolute Germ. Libs don't like to talk about the third article. They like to pretend it doesn't exist. I hate to say it, but that's kind of what I wanted to say before. I'm glad one of you said it first because, yeah, courts should not make the law. It's not their job. Their job is to adjudicate. It's to decide cases. It's to decide what does the law say in this particular case. The law is made by the legislature. PvP Trump hate is so one-dimensional. It's childish. Oh, okay. Gorillas is vouching for Booty Duty Nick. Well, howdy and welcome. I am glad to see you here. I hope I'm not too pedantic or one-sided for you. PvP, something's wrong. My thoughts for the last 25 years. I've been thinking that, gosh, for so long. I don't even know how many years it's been. Somewhere less than 50, but I suspect somewhat more than 40. I do like your name and your avatar, Booty Duty Nick. That's like a real thing. In fact, I need to get to that. So, Marbury versus Madison is what really has established the strength of the Supreme Court. If you want me to, I will dig in and get some scholarly citations. But the long and the short of it is, President Madison had made, I can't even remember all the details now, but he had made some appointments, and Congress had made a law saying that the Supreme Court could force the next executive to take the appointments before the end of his presidency or something like that. Please correct me if I'm wrong. And the Supreme Court basically was like, well, yeah, that is the law, but that's an unconstitutional law, so we're not going to abide by it. And since then, it has become kind of the Supreme Court's prerogative to decide whether a legislative act or a presidential act is constitutional or not. Everybody, welcoming everybody here. Thank you, thank you. Wonderful people, wonderful people. And as I promised, because of the generosity of Resolute Germ, I am going to read Marbury versus Madison in a pirate voice. Arrgh. We've got before us Marbury versus Madison, 5 U.S. 137, case of 1803. Arrgh. We be thinking that law is more guidelines than rules. I added that part myself. Arrgh. Oh, what is my computer doing to me here? Booty Duty, his name is Nick, and say he shall be called. So say we all. And yes, names are posting twice. That is interesting. The internet is weird to us. So this case was argued on the February 11th, 1803, and decided on February 24 the same year. And the holding was that Congress does not have the power to pass laws that override the Constitution, such as by expending the scope of the Supreme Court's original jurisdiction. Arrgh. The clerks of the Department of State of the United States may be called upon to give evidence of transactions in the department which are not of a confidential character. Avast! The Secretary of State cannot be called upon as a witness to state transactions of a confidential nature which may have occurred in his department, but he may be called upon to give testimony of circumstances which were not of that character, ye landlubbers. Clerks in the Department of State were directed to be sworn, subject to objections to questions upon confidential matters. Arrgh. Some part of time must be taken when the power of the executive over an officer not removable at his will must cease. That point of time must be when the constitutional power of appointment has been exercised. And the power has been exercised when the last act required from the person possessing the power has been performed. This last act is the signature of the commission. You shall sign the commission or walk the plank. Arrgh. Oh, we've got some comments. International Talk Like a Pirate Day is September 19th. Arrgh. He's got to count his booty. There's no way he gets through the whole thing like that. I doubt it. It's already hurting my voice. Arrgh. How long is this thing? I can do it. Maybe. I can at least do this first part. Hey, I won't read the whole opinions. Now I've lost my place. If in the act of livery be necessary to give validity to the commission of an officer, it has been delivered when executed and given to the Secretary of State for the purpose of being sealed, recorded, and transmitted to the party. In cases of commissions to public officers, the law orders the Secretary of State to record them or walk the plank, you lily-livered landlubber. When therefore they are signed and sealed, the order for their being recorded is given, and when whether inserted into the book or not, they are recorded. When the heads of the departments of the government are the political or confidential officers of the executive, merely to execute the will of the president, or rather to act in cases in which the executive possesses a constitutional or legal discretion, nothing can be more perfectly clear than that their acts are only politically examinable. Arg! But where a specific duty is assigned by law and individual rights depend upon the performance of that duty, it seems equally clear that the individual who considers himself injured has a right to resort to the laws of his country for a remedy, or will lay about and lay on him with the starboard cannon. Arg! The President of the United States, by signing the commission, appointed Mr. Marbury a Justice of the Peace for the County of Washington in the District of Columbia. And the seal of the United States affixed thereto by the Secretary of State is conclusive testimony of the verity of the signature and of the completion of the appointment, and the appointment conferred on him a legal right to the office for the space of 5 years. Having this legal right to the office, he has a consequent right to the commission, a refusal to deliver which is a plain violation of that right, for which the laws of the country afford him a remedy. There'll be fighting in the streets over this, and on the waves, and on the seas. Don't let a man be spared. To render a mandamus a proper remedy, the officer to whom it is directed must be one to whom, on legal principles, such writ must be directed, and the person applying for it must be without any other specific remedy, such as piracy. Where a commission to a public officer has been made out, signed and sealed, and is withheld from the person entitled to it, an action of detenue, whatever the hell that is, for the commission against the Secretary of State who refuses to deliver it, not the proper remedy, as chicken soup. As the judgment in detenue is for the thing itself or its value. I wonder why people hate lawyers. Arr! The value of a public office not to be sold is incapable of being ascertained. I am incapable of ascertaining what they're saying here. I'm just a pirate. It is a plain case for a mandamus either to deliver the commission or a copy of it from the record. To enable the court to issue a mandamus to compel the delivery of the commission of a public office by the Secretary of State, it must be shown that it is an exercise of appellate jurisdiction, or that it be necessary to enable them to exercise appellate jurisdiction. Arr. It is the essential criterion of appellate jurisdiction that it revises and corrects the proceedings in a cause already instituted, and does not create the cause. Avast, ye hearties! Yo ho ho, and a bottle of rum. The authority given to the Supreme Court by the act establishing the judicial system of the United States to issue writs of mandamus to public officers appears not to be warranted by the Constitution. It is emphatically the duty of the judicial department to say what the law is. Those who apply the rule to particular cases must of necessity expound and interpret the rule. If two laws conflict with each other, the court must decide on the operation of each. If courts are to regard the Constitution, and the Constitution is superior to any ordinary act of the legislature, the Constitution and not such ordinary act must govern the case to which they both apply. Otherwise, it is all just a bunch of guidelines. At the December term of 1801, William Marbury, Dennis Ramsay, Robert Townsend Hoe, and William Harper, by their counsel, severally moved the court for a rule to James Madison, Secretary of State of the United States, to show cause why a mandamus should not issue commanding him to cause to be delivered to them respectively their several commissions as justices of the peace in the District of Columbia. Because they were deprived of this, they resorted to lives of piracy and sailed the seven seas in want of booty. No, oh, sorry, that's not what it really says. This motion was supported by affidavits of the following facts: that notice of this motion had been given to Mr. Madison, that Mr. Adams, the late President of the United States, nominated the applicants to the Senate for their advice and consent to be appointed justices of the peace of the District of Columbia, that the Senate advised and consented to the appointments, the commissions in due form were signed by the said President appointing them justices, and that the seal of the United States was in due form affixed to the said commissions by the Secretary of State. No auto pen was used. That the applicants have requested Mr. Madison to deliver them their said commissions, who has not complied with that request, and that their said commissions are withheld from them. That the applicants have made application to Mr. Madison as Secretary of State of the United States at his office for information whether the commissions were signed and sealed as aforesaid. That explicit and satisfactory information has not been given in answer to that inquiry, either by the Secretary of State or any officer in the Department of State. That application has been made to the Secretary of the Senate for a certificate of the nomination of the applicants, and of the advice and consent of the Senate, who has declined giving such a certificate, whereupon a rule was made to show cause on the 4th day of this term. This rule having been duly served, Mr. Jacob Wagner and Mr. Daniel Brent, who had been summoned to attend the court and were required to give evidence, objected to be sworn, alleging that they were clerks in the Department of State and not bound to disclose any facts relating to the business or transactions of the office. The court ordered the witnesses to be sworn and their answers taken in writing, but informed them that, when the questions were asked, they might state their objections to answering each particular question if they had any. Avast, ye hearties! Mr. Lincoln, different Lincoln, who had been acting Secretary of State when the circumstances stated in the affidavits occurred, was called upon to give testimony. He objected to answering. The questions were put in writing. He went to watch SpongeBob SquarePants. The court said there was nothing confidential required to be disclosed. If there had been, he was not obliged to answer it. And if he thought anything was communicated to him confidentially, he was not bound to disclose, nor was he obliged to state anything which would criminate himself. The questions argued by the counsels for the relators were: 1. Whether the Supreme Court can award the writ of mandamus in any case. 2. Whether it will lie to a Secretary of State in any case whatever. 3. Whether in the present case the court may award a mandamus to James Madison, Secretary of State. So there it is. That's the first part. I am not going to read the rest of it, because I think the rest of it's the opinions and stuff. I don't care about that. So there you go. I hope you got your money's worth. I at least read the main brief of Marbury versus Madison. PvP, I agree with you. Congress should have to. I think that they should have to pirate talk during filibusters, especially after that. If the cause is so worthy to you, you're willing to do that to your voice, then you can find it. Jeff B. You're sounding a bit like Teddy Roosevelt now, Curtis. PvP, my ears are gonna bleed. Arg. Nick, they should PvP. They are a bunch of pirates. I can imagine the confusion of someone just joining the stream. Well, nothing wrong with that. They turned in for talk about the Constitution and got Pirate Curtis. And hail, Connie Cleary. Welcome, welcome. PvP, okay, now I'm imagining AI versions of JFK's speech about going to the moon in pirate. That needs to happen. Someone needs to do that. We decide to go to the moon, not because it is easy, but because it is hard. Kevin Theme Park later, I'm going to eat at an In-N-Out burger for dinner. Huzzah! Resolute Jeremy got further than I thought. I got further than I thought, honestly. But like I say, I try to give you your money's worth. I might probably fail, but I really do try. Connie Cleary, God bless you, has been a member for 3 months. Thank you so much. Thank you, Curtis and Cassie. Hugs. And Cassie gives you big doggy tail wags back. So why is Marbury versus Madison important? Well, Marbury versus Madison. Before that case, the Supreme Court really was mostly just kind of a list of guidelines. After that case, it became the powerhouse that it has become today. So let's see if I can get my computer to work. We have Britannica.com. Here we have Chief Justice John Marshall from the early 1800s. We've already discussed the case. We read it in their original language. I'll be honest, some of it is in legalese that I don't thoroughly understand, but this is the case that established the doctrine of judicial review. And next to the Constitution itself, this is one of the principles that is one of the bedrocks of our United States constitutional law. We already read, and I'd gotten the earlier parts wrong because I was relying on my very poor memory. Basically, in the weeks before Thomas Jefferson's inauguration as president in March of 1801, the U.S. Congress, still controlled by the lame duck Federalist Party, created 16 new circuit judgeships. Now, this has been a practice ever since. I do not know the truth of this, and I've already thrown out things that were more than I knew, so forgive me if this ends up being wrong, but my source being Rush Limbaugh, so take it with a little bit of salt. But according to him, Jimmy Carter established so many federal judgeships in the last weeks of his presidency that it took Ronald Reagan years to equal as many federal judge appointments as Carter did in just a few months. And I always felt that this was a part of the issue. I don't know if the right does it too, but the left is definitely keen on just throwing out tons of activist judges, and then the next president has to deal with a bunch of BS from lower courts. But the first person to attempt this method, or at least the first I know about, was John Adams. I respect the heck out of John Adams in a lot of ways, but sadly he was not really a great president. Great man, did great things for our country. I would say next to Washington, he was the most important person to getting the Declaration of Independence signed. Well, maybe even more important than Washington, honestly, in that aspect. But he was not a great president. And this was one of the things he did. They created 16 new circuit judgeships and an unspecified number of new judgeships in the Organic Act, which President John Adams proceeded to fill with Federalists in an effort to preserve his party's control of the judiciary and to frustrate the legislative agenda of Jefferson and his Republican or Democratic Republican Party. It's not the same Republican Party we have today. The Jeffersonians, I would say, were probably more like what we now think of as libertarian. That's a little bit of a stretch, but I think that gets the idea across better than any other modern ideas. Because he was among the last of those appointments, the so-called midnight appointments, William Marbury, a Federalist Party leader from Maryland, did not receive his commission before Jefferson became president. Once in office, Jefferson directed his Secretary of State, James Madison, to withhold the commission, and Marbury then petitioned the Supreme Court to issue a writ of mandamus, which is an order requiring the performance of a specific act, to force Madison to reinstate Marbury's commission. Marbury and his lawyer, former Attorney General Charles Lee, argued that signing and sealing the commission completed the transaction and that delivery in any event constituted a mere formality. But formality or not, without the actual piece of parchment, Marbury could not enter into the duties of the office. Despite Jefferson's hostility, the court agreed to hear the case, Marbury versus Madison, in its February of 1803 term. So we're talking 2 years here, if I am getting my details right. That had to be frustrating. Some scholars have questioned whether Marshall should have removed himself from the case because of his prior service as Adams' Secretary of State in 1800 to 1801. Certainly later judicial standards would have called for recusal, but at the time only financial connections to a case led judges to step aside, as Marshall did in suits regarding Virginia lands in which he had an interest. The Republicans, always quick to criticize Marshall, did not even raise the issue of the propriety of his sitting in the case. The issue directly presented by Marbury versus Madison can only be described as minor. By the time the court heard the case, the wisdom of Jefferson's desire to reduce the number of circuit justices had been confirmed, and the Judiciary Act of 1801 had been repealed. Marbury's original term was almost half over, and most people, Federalists and Republicans alike, considered the case to be moot. But Marshall, despite the political difficulties involved, recognized that he had a perfect case with which to expound a basic principle, judicial review, which would secure the judiciary's role in constitutional interpretation. The Chief Justice recognized the dilemma posed by the case. If the court issued the writ of mandamus, Jefferson could simply ignore it because the court had no power to enforce it. And that's a problem still today. Courts often really don't have the power to enforce anything, often. Connie Clear, sorry I'm late, got back home not long ago. That is fine. And it is why history matters. Yeah. There's definitely reasons why history matter. PvP youngsters don't realize history created their present day and they need to look at the past. Resolute Germ Rush was right more than I am. I'm no longer as big of a fan as I used to be, but I am going to say this. I will always say this. I am forever grateful to him, if only for he was the one that revealed to me just how much the media lies. And this was back then when the media was actually profoundly better than it is now. I had not understood before just how far to the left things had gone, and now we're to a point where someone, Clinton then would be a freaking right winger now. Of course, he's not now because he basically just runs around. I don't know what he does. I'm just going to keep my mouth shut. I'm not a fan of the Clintons. We'll leave it at that. PvP, to be ignorant of what occurred before you were born is to remain always a child. Great quote. Marcus Tullius Cicero, 106 BC to 43 BC. All right, I will skip down a bit. And just as they said in the brief, did Marbury have the right to the commission? If he did and his right had been violated, did the law provide him with a remedy? And if it did, would the proper remedy be a writ of mandamus from the Supreme Court? The last most crucial question dealt with the jurisdiction of the court. In normal circumstances, it would have been answered first, since a negative response would have obviated the need to decide the other issues. But that would have denied Marshall the opportunity to criticize Jefferson for what the Chief Justice saw as the president's flouting of the law. I'm sure that if you're a big pro Jefferson person, you're probably thinking, well, Marbury was just being a big poophead. And maybe so. But for good or ill, what he did ended up having strong historical importance. Following the arguments of Marbury's counsel on the first two questions, Marshall held that the validity of a commission existed once the president signed it and transmitted it to the Secretary of State to affix the seal. Presidential discretion ended there, for the political decision had been made, and the Secretary of State had only a ministerial task to perform, delivering the commission. In that, the law bound him, like anyone else, to obey. Marshall drew a careful and lengthy distinction between the political acts of the president and the secretary, in which the courts had no business interfering, and the simple administrative execution that, governed by law, the judiciary could review. Having decided that Marbury had the right to the commission, Marshall next turned to the question of remedy, and once again found in the plaintiff's favor, holding that having this legal right to the office, Marbury has a consequent right to the commission, a refusal to deliver which is a plain violation of that right, for which the laws of his country afford him a remedy. After castigating Jefferson and Madison for sporting away the vested rights of others, Marshall addressed the crucial third question. Although it could have held that the proper remedy was a writ of mandamus from the Supreme Court, because the law that had granted courts the power of mandamus in original rather than appellate jurisdiction, the Judiciary Act of 1789, was still in effect, he instead declared that the court had no power to issue such a writ, because the relevant provision of the act was unconstitutional. Section 13 of the act, he argued, was inconsistent with Article 3, Section 2 of the Constitution, which states in part that the Supreme Court shall have original jurisdiction in all cases affecting ambassadors, other public ministers and consuls, and those in which a state shall be party, and that in all other cases before mentioned, the Supreme Court shall have appellate jurisdiction. In thus surrendering the power derived from the 1789 statute and giving Jefferson a technical victory in the case, Marshall gained for the Supreme Court and lower courts a far more significant power, that of judicial review. So I would suggest, in my humble opinion, Marshall's brilliant. He's giving up some short-term gain for a long-term gain of his branch of the government. Marshall's masterful verdict has been widely hailed. In the face of attacks on the judiciary launched by Jefferson and his followers, Marshall needed to make a strong statement to maintain the status of the Supreme Court as the head of a co-equal branch of government. By asserting the power to declare acts of Congress unconstitutional, which the court would not exercise again for more than half a century, Marshall claimed for the judiciary a paramount position as interpreter of the Constitution. Although Marbury versus Madison set an abiding precedent for the judiciary's power in that area, it did not end debate over its purview, which has continued for more than 2 centuries. In fact, it is likely that the issue will never be fully resolved, but the fact remains courts have exercised the power of judicial review through most of U.S. history, and as Judge Learned Hand noted more than a century later, the country is used to it by now. Moreover, the principle fits well with the government's professed commitment to checks and balances. Few judges can argue with Marshall's statement of principle near the end of his opinion, that a law repugnant to the Constitution is void, and that courts as well as other departments are bound by that instrument. So, my question to you, first of all, is that a valid principle? And two, how do you think it applies to the recent cases? Do you think that these lower courts can use that principle to say, hey, Trump can't do this, Trump must do that? Or is that a misinterpretation of the judiciary itself? And I'm very interested in knowing what you guys think, because that's kind of the point of this constitutional thing. Part of it's so that we can all review it, and those who haven't learned from it maybe will listen and learn. But the other point is, what do we think about these principles, these thoughts, these things that are in the Constitution? Resolute germ. All Bill does now is chase tail, usually the underage and unwilling kind. Yeah, Bill Clinton. Yeah, I. I mean, maybe I'm being unfair, but I concur. I concur. I don't argue with people that like the Clintons, but I personally do not. Resolute germ. That whole co-equal thing is a problem. And it kind of is, because the founding fathers' idea was that they would all three be they would all three act as a check on the other, but the balance of power was supposed to be legislative, then executive, then judicial. And I get trying to make it more equal, because that's basically what people do. We try to make whatever we're managing more powerful and more important. But I guess the thing is, I still do believe that we need a judiciary to keep both the legislature and the executive from doing unconstitutional and tyrannical things. But where is the point where it steps too far? I'm going to throw out a ridiculous example, or at least I hope it's a ridiculous example. I hope there's no case that was like this, but when Congress declared war on Japan, I don't think that there were maybe 2% or 3% of the United States citizens who at the time would have said, oh, hell no, Japan has the right to invade, they have the right to bomb us, and we should not respond. I think very few people would have thought that. So, I hope, hypothetical example, if there was some lower court that came along and said, no, you have no right to declare war, would FDR have listened? Would the American public have listened? Would that judge maybe have found himself being dragged out of his hotel bedroom at night and literally having the crap beat out of him? Yeah, there is an actual example of that I know about, but I'm not going to discuss it here. And it's not what I was talking about. It was something else from a different time. But I'm just asking, and I would really love to know what you guys think. Where is that line? There's got to be some common sense place where it's okay for judges to say, no, the government can't do this. But there also has to be a point where the government can say, you're just a court, go get stuffed. And I'm not always sure I know where that line is. PvP proposed laws that go against freedom should be invalid. I would concur with that. Jeff B. Balance of power is a farce, in my opinion. The branch with the guns and the might makes the rules. And that's one of the reasons why the executive department has ended up being the most powerful. And I personally don't like it, but it's the reality. The executive department has the guns, so they make the rules. That's where we've gotten. It's gotten to where the legislature has abandoned most of its power. They're finding their voice again, I think, in a very dangerous and incorrect place, closing down the federal government. Before we go, let's take a quick look at what the courts are doing with the government shutdown. Just let's see what's going on and see what we think, trying to apply what we've learned today on that. Role of courts, federal courts. Well, no, just any courts in the federal shutdown. Okay. Which I haven't checked. I'm assuming it's still going on because I would have thought that I would have gotten a crud ton of notifications if it had finally stopped. Oh, wow. That's an interesting aspect. Okay. Let's look at something that I hadn't even thought of and should have. I'm going to go with legalclarity.org. I really wish it wouldn't change this way, but that's okay. Arr, arr. Okay, so according to legalclarity.org, they talk about the government shutdown. I'm going to skip through that because we know what that is. I think most of us know the whys and wherefores. If any of you feel the need, I will be happy to dive deeper into it. But for now, I'm going to assume that you're all educated on why the government shutdown's happening and how it's impacting things. Specifically, I want to look into how it impacts the courts. And I was actually thinking how the courts are impacting it. I haven't even been thinking, and I should have, about how it could be impacting the courts themselves. Federal court operations during a shutdown. Federal courts are considered essential. They do not completely cease operations during a shutdown. Their ability to maintain full services depends on available funds, such as court fees or prior year appropriations. During a shutdown, federal courts operate under contingency plans that prioritize certain functions while curtailing others, often leading to reduced staff and a focus on critical matters. Criminal cases, especially those involving defendants in custody, usually proceed without interruption to protect constitutional rights and public safety. Emergency civil matters, such as temporary restraining orders or injunctions, may also continue to be heard. Conversely, non emergency civil cases, administrative functions like processing new filings, and some appellate proceedings may be delayed or postponed. Non emergency civil cases. The shutdown's duration directly influences these operational adjustments as courts must conserve limited funds. State courts operate independently of the federal government and are funded by their respective state budgets. Consequently, a federal government shutdown has no direct impact on the operations of state court systems. These courts continue to hear cases, process filings, and conduct business as usual, provided their state governments are not experiencing their own separate funding issues. Their operational continuity is tied to state level appropriations, not federal ones. While a state level government shutdown could affect state court, such an event is distinct from a federal shutdown. So, interesting. I don't know why, but I did not really even think about that. And it makes me think, do we have any examples of federal court ordering Trump to pay their bills? That would be an interesting thing. PvP, if Carney gets his majority bills C2, C8, and C9, I need to watch those videos. Currently, before Parliament will shut down our right to free speech and expression, it will even give Carney powers to arrest and jail us. I bet the website illegalconfusion.org gets more views. I kind of hope so, if I'm understanding correctly. So, U.S. courts face first furloughs under shutdown in 30 years. Somehow I don't feel any sympathy for the courts. Maybe I should, but Reuters is saying that at least three of the country's federal trial level courts in Alabama, Alaska, and Connecticut are limiting operations on Fridays to meet legal operations during the shutdown. Court funding is at risk during the shutdown. Yeah, maybe it should, but it really doesn't bother me. I mean, and we don't seem to have any law and order anyway. What good is the courts doing us? What have courts ordered Trump to do during the lockdown? All it's really saying is what the Supreme Court has allowed, which is convenient because I want to know what the lower courts are doing. Here we go. Let's go with NPR, even though I no longer hold them to be centrist at all. Let's see what they have to say. I really wanted to know what the lower courts are saying, but evidently Google doesn't think I need to know anything about that. So, NPR, Supreme Court temporarily blocks full SNAP benefits even as they've started to go out. The U.S. Supreme Court temporarily granted the Trump administration's request to block full SNAP food benefits during the government shutdown, even as residents in some states had already begun receiving them. And I can attest to that. I work in a part-time in a grocery store. We had one of the slowest first of the months in a long time, but there has been a fairly steady stream of people coming in recently who have SNAP, which I'm not saying is good or bad. I'm just saying that that's what I've observed. The Trump administration is appealing a court order to fully restart the country's largest anti-hunger program. The high court decision late Friday gives a lower court time to consider a more lasting pause. The move may add to confusion, though, since the government said it was sending the states money on Friday to fully fund SNAP at the same time it appealed the order to pay for them. So, I mean, that actually makes sense to me. That's not confusing to me. I'm happy to pay the bill, but by God, you trying to force me to when you're just a lower court, if I'm the president, I'm saying that's bullshit. Shortly after U.S. District Judge John McConnell Jr. issued that decision Thursday afternoon, states started to announce they'd be issuing full SNAP benefits. Some people woke up Friday with the money already on the debit like EBT cards they use to buy groceries. Side note, I still make too much money to have SNAP. I'm just pointing that out. The number of states kept growing and included California, Oregon, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Connecticut, among others. Imagine that. Mostly red or blue states. I mean, not entirely, I guess, but the Supreme Court's decision means states must for now revert back to the partial payments the Trump administration had earlier instructed them to distribute. Duh. While the U.S. Court of Appeals for the First Circuit rejected the administration's request for an administrative stay, the appeals court said it would consider the request for the stay and intends to issue a decision as quickly as possible. Funding for the nation's largest anti-hunger program ran out a week ago as the federal shutdown entered its second month. States, cities, and food banks have been ramping up donations, desperately trying to fill the gap. Nearly 42 million people rely on SNAP. You notice they don't say citizens. I'm just pointing that out. Most of them extremely low income families, which I mean, that's true mostly, with children, along with seniors or people with disabilities. In his order, Judge McConnell admonished the government for deciding earlier in the week to make only partial SNAP payments. He said officials failed to consider the needless suffering. I wonder if he included all officials or just Trump, since Trump's not the one that closed down the government. Anyway, did officials consider the needless suffering that would cause millions of people who rely on that aid? He also suggested they delayed the partial payments for political reasons. I maybe I shouldn't. I'm assuming this judge is going after the Trump administration, and I would be okay with that. But if you're going to go after the one, you have to go after the other too. At least in this case, I do not see a single damn thing that says that any Republican other than Rand Paul, who I'm usually a big fan of, other than him, I do not think a single Republican has voted to shut down the government. So please explain to me how it's their fault. I'm listening for a little bit anyway. All right, let's see what we got in the chat. PvP, what time is the Dark Shadows stream? I'll get with you at the end of this one. I'm almost done. Heading to Sith Dan stream soon. He invited me. Okay, well, I'm pretty much done anyway. I hope. I don't know if we really learned anything. I hope we did. Essentially, the Supreme Court has a bit of power, quite a bit of power, but it isn't all what was granted in the Constitution. A lot of it was what was established by Marbury versus Madison. The courts, it's still very questionable. I mean, we haven't really found any answers, but by the Constitution, I would suggest that lower courts telling the executive department to do stuff. I mean, it's like the dilemma that Chief Justice Marshall had. Sure, you can throw that out there, but the president can also turn around and tell you to pound sand. You don't have an army. You don't have police that can come and get the president, right? So, and let's get caught up in the chat and then we will call it stream. Hey folks, what did I miss? John, I'm so sorry. We talked about basically the growth in the power of the Supreme Court, the growth in the power of the lower courts, and how essentially some of the growth of court power comes from court cases. Some of it comes from actual laws, which is where it should come from, really, mostly. And also, some of it is just arbitrary pointlessness of, as PvP is saying here, activist judges. Activist courts worry me. They could do good or bad things. They should be accountable. And it's true. Not every ruling that an activist judge makes is something I disagree with. But the question still abides. Does Trump have to abide by this SNAP payment thing? And, you know, whether it's right or wrong, does a lower court have the authority to order him to do anything? As a conservative, I suggest that they don't. That basically, if he wants to, he can tell them to pound sand. The Supreme Court, that is a little more arguable. PvP Democrats care about the little guy, want them to go hungry. Hypocrites, that is indeed what I get out of it. PvP, I'm old enough to remember that government actually worked to help citizens. Those days are long gone. Yeah, the government shutdown happened to use people as leverage, and that's a direct quote. If anyone wants to challenge me on it, I'll be happy to look it up. But that was a direct quote, I believe, from our friend Chuck Schumer, who is now my favorite person in the world. Having said that, I still would be kinder to him than to Anthony Fauci or Bill Gates if they were to fall into my clutches. Jeff B. would have thought the Dems would have reopened the government after the No Kings rally and recent elections. Well, the thing is, these recent elections make them think that they're gaining ground, when I would suggest they're not gaining ground. They just won in states where they were already guaranteed to win. So, the real challenge will be, what? I need to look more into it, but I still don't understand why a California law can impact how Texas does their districting. Once again, I would think that if I'm the governor of Texas, I'm going to tell Gavin Newsom to pound sand. They can legislate whatever the hell they want, but we as a state have the right to make our districts however we like. Anyway, alrighty, and PvP courts have made bad decisions lately. I've lost faith in my courts. Yeah. And to be honest, I read a book here a long time ago about how the Supreme Court actually has a long history of very poor decisions. I'm having another senior moment. What was the case about the freed slave? Lemon versus New York. That's not the one. The Dred Scott decision. Basically, a northern state had to send slaves no matter what down to the South. Even though I'm a fairly big fan of states' rights, it's the truth in the other direction. Virginia wants its slaves back, sends a letter to the New York governor. I'm the governor of New York. I would tell him to pound sand. Gorillas has been censored again. Jeez. All right, let's see what he's got. Okay. Oh wow, I have no idea why this would be censored. I hope I'm not. Oh, because you mentioned bang bangs. Wow. So Gorillas is going to be doing a stream for the 50th anniversary of the Edmund Fitzgerald. If I had the gas, I would go to Lake Superior and commemorate it the American way. 29 bang bangs fired into Lake Superior. Yeah, there's no way that should have been censored, but because you said something about bang bangs, yeah, we're going to censor you. All right. I'm going to call it a stream. I hope that this was worthy of your time. And I sure appreciate the super chats that I got. You guys are wunderbar. PvP, the ostrich fiasco is a prime example. Won't get into it here. It's too complicated. Yeah, basically, your government can't protect you from illegal aliens, but they can kill ostriches because they don't want them. And I'm going to call it a stream, and we'll discuss when we want to do the Dark Shadows. A friend has money bet on reopening the government on January 12th of 26. Yikes. Yep. Well, yeah, I hope we've got a few weeks at least of food saved up. All righty. So many good people in here. And so many. Did I miss some super chats? I got Resolute Germs. I got Jeff B's. Okay, and then Okay. All right. Glory to your streams. Welcome. Please, y'all, check out Gorilla's Random Thoughts. He's got a stream coming up tonight about the 50th anniversary of the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald. So I'm going to try and schedule Dark Shadows to be either before or after that. Resolute Germ, welcome. Another great creator here. Check out his stuff. Kevin Theme Park Adventure, another great creator. I think just nearly all of you are great creators. Jeff B, I don't think you do any creating, but you're one of the most supportive people. Thank you. I gifted out 5 Curtis Selby memberships. I hope that I do a better job of providing value for those members. Realway Nation Gaming Clips, another great creator, is going to be doing a stream tomorrow on Gravity Falls. So you might think about checking him out if you can. Resolute Germ sent me $2 super chat. Thanks for the membership. I am glad, and I hope you enjoy it. Let me know, because I know I'm not doing great, but I'm trying to do better as far as providing value for the consumer, because that's the way capitalism is supposed to work. PvP, thank you very much. Another wonderful creator. He has some really cool playlists. Sci-Fi Sit Down, he's doing a stream soon. Please check him out. Feel free and drop that link in the chat if you would like. Scooby-Doo. Jeff B, $5 super chat. Not an advocate for karaoke unless the sound is the sound of silence. Oh, hey, while I'm at it, let me check that poll. Every single thing got a click. So 59% of you say that yes, lower courts assume too much power. 12% say no, they don't. And that, that's I'm not arguing. Yeah, that is your vote. 24% of you say I like turtles, and 6% of you, which means that one guy may have returned. I hope that he listened and understands what we're trying to say. But you know what? I'm not going to judge him. Judge not, lest ye be judged. I already know what this channel is. So the vast majority of you say yes, lower courts have assumed too much power, and just about more than three quarters of you say yes, and I like turtles. Just saying. All right. Scooby-Doo. Scooby-Goo. Scooby-Doo. Yeah, I totally understand your feeling on that one, Resolute Germ. I'm really tired of being fair to the other side, and then turns out one of ours gets unalived, or they do things that don't play by the rules. Booty Doody Nick, I hope you enjoyed your stay here, and please come on back if you liked what you heard. I'm not always this pedantic and serious. Mostly I just do watch parties anymore. They're a lot less likely to get censored by YouTube. Hail, Connie Cleary, another wonderful creator. She does videos with birds. She does the crafty stuff. She does stuff with Dino. I need to listen to more of those night watch parties. She has been a member for 3 months. God bless you and thank you. Rush was right. Unfair debates with half of his mind tied behind his back. I miss him. Like I say, I lost some of my fanship of him, but I still love the guy, and I learned a lot from him. Matt Cheatwood, evening. Hope you are doing well. I hope you all had a happy anniversary the other day. Oh, ouch! Jeff B., that's cruel and unusual punishment. Matt, your late punishment is to watch The View on Monday. Matt Cheatwood, I respectfully decline to acquiesce to your request. All right, I'm going to try and remember my old saying. It has been said that life is pain, and anyone telling you otherwise is trying to sell you something. I am, in fact, trying to sell you something. I'm trying to sell you on the idea that liberty is better than tyranny, freedom is better than slavery, and that, in spite of what you're told, you are, in fact, smart enough and wise enough to run your own life. You do not need big governments or big corporations to tell you how to live your life or how to think. And lastly of all, along with John Ponterero and Jeff B., I would like to say, spoon! Y'all have a wonderful evening, and hopefully I see you at Gorillas or possibly on my watch party of Dark Shadows. Take care and have a great evening.